"Watch your step," Vanessa whispered, her smile too sweet to be real. Just before a sudden shove sent me teetering over the polished railing of their luxury yacht. The water below looked calm, almost inviting, but I knew better. My son, Daniel, just stood there, arms crossed, a tight, unnatural grin on his face. My own blood, the man I raised, nurtured, and trusted was part of this plan. 8 billion. That's what they were after. Everything my late husband Robert had built, everything I had preserved, was now a lure dangling in front of their greedy eyes, and they weren't even subtle about it. I hit the water hard, the cold shocking my system. My navy blue dress, carefully chosen that morning, now clung to me like a second skin, restricting movement, making the swim toward survival a fight of every muscle. But I knew I had to make it. Robert had always said I was stronger. Then I thought, today, that strength would mean life or death. It had started innocently enough, or so I'd been foolish enough to believe. Daniel had called me personally that morning, his voice warm, filled with concern about my recovery from hip surgery. "Mom, we want to celebrate your healing. Just a small cruise, our treat," he'd said. His words had felt genuine. Like the sun I knew was still somewhere beneath that polished exterior. Vanessa's laugh had sounded like a bell, delicate and harmless. I'd dressed with care, hoping to recapture a sense of normalcy, a semblance of family. Before the chaos began, when I arrived at the marina, the yacht gleamed like a palace floating on water. Daniel's arms were ready for a hug I should have recognized as performative. Vanessa lingered on deck, her gaze sharp and calculating. That was my first mistake. I believed that family meant loyalty, that blood was thicker than seawater. And now, suspended between the waves and betrayal, I realized the horrifying truth. I was alone, surrounded by sharks in more ways than one. I suppose I should have seen it coming, I whispered to myself, shivering in the cold water. At 67, I still believed that family meant something. I believed that loyalty, love, and blood were thicker than seawater. Robert had always said that, and for years, I held onto it. After Robert passed 2 years ago, everything changed. The estate, the tech empire, the fortune we had built together. Suddenly, I was the only one left to manage it. Daniel had seemed different since then, more distant, more calculating. Vanessa, she had always been charming, but now her charm had a sharp edge, like a knife wrapped in velvet. The morning had started beautifully, or at least it seemed that way. Daniel called me directly, not through his assistant, which I should have realized was unusual. His voice was warm, filled with concern about my hip replacement recovery. I had been recovering for 6 weeks, trying to regain some independence. I wanted to feel useful again, wanted to feel like I mattered to my family. They invited me on a yacht cruise, claiming it was a celebration of my recovery. "Mom, we just want to toast your healing," Daniel had said. It sounded so simple, so kind. Vanessa smiled from the deck, a little too perfectly, a little too controlled. I dressed carefully that morning in my navy blue dress, the one Robert always said brought out my eyes. I wanted to look elegant, poised, deserving of the love I believed they still had for me. But as we sailed out of the marina, little details began to nag at me. Daniel's questions about the will, casual at first, made me uneasy. Vanessa subtly filming me, pretending to take selfies, felt like a violation of trust. The way they both watched me, studied me, made my stomach churn. I remembered the money I had given Daniel for his consulting firm, $3 million that I thought would help him start something meaningful. Now I suspected it had been spent on the yacht, the luxuries, and nothing productive. Everything I had done to help them had been twisted into a weapon against me. And yet, I still believed I could reason with them. I still hoped for a glimpse of the children I raised, the family I loved. Little did I know, that morning would mark the day I realized just how much I had misjudged the people I trusted most. Trust had been my mistake, love had been my weakness, and my life was about to hang in the balance because of it. Every decision, every gesture, every smile had been measured against their selfish ambition, and I was only beginning to see the full scope of their betrayal. As we sailed farther from the shore, a strange tension filled the air. I whispered to myself, gripping the yacht's railing. Daniel's questions started casually, almost innocent, but each one carried an edge. "Have you considered updating your will, Mom?" he asked. "Nothing serious, just curious." I smiled, trying to hide the unease in my stomach. Vanessa, meanwhile, seemed distracted, pretending to take photos of the water, her phone angled strangely, catching me in every movement. something about it didn't feel right. Why was she filming so much? I told myself it was nothing, just part of the celebration, but little details kept piling up. The way Daniel refilled my glass with an almost nervous eagerness. The glances exchanged between him and Vanessa, silent but loaded. Even the way the yacht staff seemed unusually attentive, hovering nearby at odd moments. All of it combined into a feeling of danger I could not ignore. I remembered the financial documents they had insisted on helping me with after my surgery. Temporary power of attorney, they said, just to help with bills while I recovered. Now I wondered if that had been their first step in something far more sinister. The questions became sharper, more pointed. Have you thought about how to handle probate, Mom? Daniel asked casually. It's tricky, you know, especially if someone were unable to manage things properly. His words were smooth, polished, but I could hear the threat beneath them. Vanessa's smile never wavered, but her eyes were cold and calculating. She moved closer, pretending to adjust a cushion. That was when I noticed it, tiny movements, subtle cues that revealed intent. The way her hand lingered over my belongings, her gaze scanning every surface. It was a performance, rehearsed and precise. I felt a chill as the realization hit me. They were not just asking questions. They were gathering evidence. Every word I spoke, every action I took was being recorded, analyzed, stored for some future purpose. The pieces clicked together in horrifying clarity. The surgery, the temporary documents, the careful guidance from my financial advisor, all of it had been manipulated. They were building a case against me, one that would make me appear incapable, confused, even demented. I looked at Daniel, searching for the boy I once knew. There was no trace left, only the calculated ambition of a man who had learned to betray the people who loved him. My chest tightened, but my mind remained sharp. I would not be fooled. I would not be weak, and I would not allow them to take what was rightfully mine. From that moment, I began to observe, to record, to memorize every detail. I would turn their plan against them, piece by piece, with patience and cunning. The first step in surviving this betrayal was understanding it completely, and I now did. The moment I demanded to return to shore, the tension snapped. I whispered to myself, gripping the railing tightly. Daniel's face hardened, the warmth gone from his voice. I'm afraid that's not possible, Mom, he said, calmly. His words were smooth, but the threat beneath them was undeniable. Vanessa moved closer, her hand lightly brushing my arm, pretending to study me. Her smile was sharp, like broken glass. She whispered, "Say hi to the sharks," and I felt a shove that knocked me off balance. The water rushed up to meet me before I could react. I hit the Atlantic cold and hard. The shock of the icy water stole my breath. My dress clung to me, heavy with water, making every movement a struggle. Panic rose, but I forced it down, remembering the swimming lessons Robert had taught me decades ago. I could not let fear win. I kicked toward the surface, breaking through just in time to gasp for air. Daniel shouted, "Mom, oh God, Mom." Vanessa's voice was low, controlled, speaking into a phone. "Yes," she said, "we'll need you to file the emergency petition first thing Monday morning." They were treating my survival as an inconvenience, not a threat. My mind raced. I had to survive, but I also had to be smart. The yacht sped away, leaving me alone in the vast ocean. Currents tugged at me, and waves threatened to drag me under. Every instinct screamed to fight, to stay alive, to not let them win. I spotted a fishing boat in the distance. Captain Jake Morrison and his grandson Tyler were exactly the kind of people who would jump into danger without hesitation. I called out, waving frantically. They saw me struggling, and within moments, I was hauled aboard, shivering violently. Jake wrapped me in blankets, his hands strong and steady, grounding me. Tyler started the engine, while Jake assessed the situation. "Holy hell, lady, what happened to you?" he asked. I tried to catch my breath as I explained, careful not to reveal too much. "We need to get you to shore safely, quietly," I said. "They cannot know I survived." Jake's eyes were sharp, seasoned from years on the water. He understood immediately. "Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't look like following the rules," he said slowly. As we navigated toward a secluded dock, I realized the first step in my revenge had begun. I had survived the ocean, but the battle for my fortune and justice was only starting. I would not allow them to think they had won. They had underestimated me, assumed my age and surgery made me weak, but I was far from powerless, and as the shore approached, I began forming a plan, piece by piece, to reclaim what was mine. Jake wrapped me in blankets. The cold still biting through my clothes, I whispered to myself, shivering violently. Tyler handed me a cup of hot coffee, and the warmth slowly began to return. The sea had tried to take me, but I had survived. I was alive, and that meant I still had choices. They did not know I lived, and that gave me an advantage, I said softly, an advantage I intended to use to its fullest. As we approached a small, hidden dock, Jake spoke quietly. "We need to get you somewhere safe," he said. "Somewhere they will not find you." Mrs. Chen's bed and breakfast was the perfect refuge. She had run the place for 30 years and understood discretion. "Cash only," she said, without even asking questions. She handed me a bowl of hot soup, her eyes assessing but kind. "You look like someone running from more than just danger," she said softly. I nodded, too exhausted to argue, but mentally forming the next steps. The blankets and warmth were temporary, but they gave me clarity. I needed allies, information, and a secure location to plan. Jake agreed to be my eyes and ears, monitoring the marina and Daniel's movements. His boat was perfect for the task, legitimate for fishing charters, yet flexible for surveillance. As I sipped the soup, I reflected on the betrayal I had endured. Daniel, my son, and Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, had carefully orchestrated my near-death experience. All the documents, the questions, the subtle recordings. It had been a year-long plan. And now, while they believed I was gone, I had time to strategize. I reviewed what I knew so far: the temporary power of attorney, the manipulated medical records, the subtle coaching to make me appear confused. Every step of their scheme had been designed to make me powerless and compliant. But I was neither powerless nor compliant. I had survived the water, and that survival had reignited my resolve. Mrs. Chen's quiet kindness gave me hope. Jake's trust and knowledge of the marina provided the means to act. I would rebuild my understanding of their plan, document every clue, and prepare for the moment I would turn the tables. For now, recovery was essential, both physical and mental. I would regain my strength, and when the time came, they would not see what hit them. The first night in safety was a mixture of fear and determination. The ocean had nearly taken me, but I had adapted, survived, and now was ready for the next chapter. Revenge, carefully planned and executed, would be mine. And as I drifted into an easy sleep, I knew one thing with certainty. I was far from finished, and the game had only just begun. The next morning, I woke early, the events of the yacht still fresh in my mind. I whispered to myself, the cold water, the shove, the betrayal, it all played in a loop. But now, I had time, privacy, and determination. Mrs. Chen's B&B was quiet, a perfect place to think without interruptions. I needed to understand everything Daniel and Vanessa had done, and who might have helped them. I said softly, the temporary power of attorney, the hospital paperwork, even the manipulated advice from my financial advisor, it had not been orchestrated by them alone. Someone else had provided information and guidance. Jake provided what I needed first: observations from the marina. He noted when Daniel and Vanessa visited the yacht, who they spoke to, and when suspicious packages or envelopes appeared. Tyler took photographs discreetly, capturing the movements and timing of their actions. Every small detail mattered, every pattern was a clue. I began compiling my own notes, comparing dates, conversations, and events. The birthday party photograph, where I appeared bewildered, was clearly staged. The doctor's reports about my confusion had been doctored, or at least selectively interpreted. Every moment of vulnerability had been exploited. Even minor accidents, like the prescription bottle mix-up, had been intentionally orchestrated to prove incompetence. I also researched the legal aspects of power of attorney and estate transfers. I needed to know the limits of their authority and the ways they could be legally challenged. The estate was vast, worth billions, and one wrong move could cost me everything. I could not afford mistakes. As the day wore on, I pieced together the first layer of their plot. Daniel had been gathering evidence for months, if not longer. Vanessa's social charm and ability to manipulate appearances had been weaponized. They had recruited someone inside my financial team, someone who knew the inner workings of my accounts and investments. Every move was deliberate, methodical, and cold. I also discovered inconsistencies in their stories. They claimed to be focused on their careers, yet had been acquiring new properties, extravagant purchases, and luxury vehicles. Their timeline of supposed events did not match bank statements or utility records. Someone was maintaining my old house, paying bills that they should not have been responsible for. I made a note, investigate the house next. The more I uncovered, the more dangerous it became. If they realized I was alive, or suspected I knew the details of their plot, they might act again. Care was paramount, and patience was essential. I could not confront them directly, not yet. I needed evidence, allies, and a plan. By evening, I had a clearer understanding of the magnitude of their betrayal. Every aspect of my life had been monitored, manipulated, and weaponized against me, and yet, for the first time, I felt a spark of control. I was no longer a victim floating helplessly in the ocean. I was a strategist analyzing the enemy and preparing for counteraction. Jake's eyes met mine as we reviewed notes and photographs. "You've got them on the ropes," he said quietly. I nodded, feeling the weight of survival and the promise of revenge. Every piece of evidence, every observation, every detail would be used against them. And the day would come when Daniel and Vanessa would realize that underestimating me had been their gravest mistake. After days of careful observation, I knew it was time to plan. I whispered to myself, I had survived the water, uncovered the plot, and understood the full scope of their betrayal. Now, strategy was everything. I spread out the notes, photographs, and documents on Mrs. Chen's kitchen table. Each paper represented a piece of the puzzle, a clue to their intentions, and a potential weapon in my hands. Jake watched silently, offering advice without interfering. Tyler checked the perimeter, ensuring no one could overhear our plans. First, I needed to identify all co-conspirators, I said firmly, who in my financial team had aided Daniel and Vanessa, who had access to sensitive documents and information. Every connection had to be mapped. I began drawing a timeline, marking events from the hospital, the yacht, and my own house. The birthday photograph, the manipulated medical records, the prescription bottle switch, they all fit into a single, horrifying plan. Daniel and Vanessa had calculated each move meticulously, but even the most careful planning could be countered with intelligence, patience, and foresight. I had learned that from Robert. Next, I needed allies beyond Jake and Tyler, someone with knowledge of the legal system, someone who could act quietly but decisively. I began contacting old friends, former colleagues, and trusted professionals without revealing too much. I needed to know who could be trusted completely. Then came the psychological strategy. I would let Daniel and Vanessa believe their plan had succeeded. They would think I was gone, that their victory was assured. That false confidence would be crucial when the time came to strike. I needed them to lower their guard completely. I also considered the house. The fact that someone was maintaining it suggested more than just greed. There was a baby, I remembered, crying within its walls. This introduced another variable, one that could affect my approach. I needed to gather information discreetly, without alerting anyone to my presence. As the sun set, I reviewed the plan. Step 1, remain undetected while gathering additional evidence. Step 2, map out all potential vulnerabilities in their scheme. Step 3, use patience and timing to reclaim what was mine. Every action had to be precise, calculated, and deliberate. Jake nodded, understanding my intent. "You're not just surviving," he said quietly. "You're preparing to win." I felt a surge of confidence, a sense of purpose that had been absent since the betrayal began. For the first time in days, I believed that justice would be mine, and that Daniel and Vanessa would face the consequences of underestimating me. The day of confrontation had finally arrived. I whispered to myself, standing in the shadows near my former home. Every step I took was careful, measured, and deliberate. Daniel and Vanessa believed I was gone, and that ignorance was my advantage. They thought the ocean had claimed me, and that their plan was complete. I had gathered all the evidence, photographs, financial statements, and recordings. Jake had scouted the property for days, noting security cameras, schedules, and the movements of the couple. Tyler remained vigilant, ready to assist if anything went wrong. I felt a sense of control I had not experienced in weeks, a mixture of fear and determination. I waited until Daniel and Vanessa were hosting a small gathering, designed to showcase their victory. They moved through the crowd with polished smiles, gestures perfect, presenting a facade of grieving children who had lost their mother. Every interaction was calculated, every compliment a lie meant to deceive friends, neighbors, and colleagues. Their confidence enraged me, but I remained calm. As they laughed and shook hands, I slipped inside the house through a hidden side entrance. The familiar scent of home, mixed with new furniture and subtle luxuries, made my stomach churn. I moved cautiously, photographing key documents and placing markers for evidence collection. Every step reminded me of how deeply they had betrayed me. I could not allow them to sense my presence or alert anyone. Daniel's voice echoed through the living room. "We need to finalize the accounts," he said casually, but with an undertone of triumph. Vanessa nodded, her eyes scanning for anyone who might interfere. Little did they know, I was inside, documenting every detail of their plans and capturing their overconfidence. I reached the office, where the so-called Margaret Project lay exposed. Legal papers, timelines, and coded instructions detailed every step of their plot to declare me incompetent and seize the fortune. The handwriting, dates, and annotations were damning, leaving no doubt about their intentions. I took photographs meticulously, knowing this would be the foundation of my case and eventual revenge. As I worked, I heard footsteps approaching. I froze, listening as Daniel and Vanessa entered the office, speaking softly about next steps. They believed I had been safely removed, that my supposed disappearance ensured their control. The audacity of their confidence made my blood boil, but I remained hidden, collecting every piece of evidence I could. From the shadows, I recorded their conversation, capturing every incriminating word. Their voices were smooth, deceptive, but the content was irrefutable. They discussed timelines, co-conspirators, and methods to finalize the estate, revealing their meticulous planning. Every word became proof, every plan a nail in the coffin of their deceit. When they left, I slipped out quietly, leaving no trace of my presence. I had what I needed, and now it was time to act strategically. The confrontation had not been direct, but it had exposed the full depth of their betrayal and greed. With evidence secured, I could finally prepare for the next phase, turning the tables, exposing the truth, and reclaiming everything that had been stolen from me. Patience, timing, and precision would be my allies as I moved forward, knowing they would never suspect my survival or the plan I had devised in secret. The plan had been set, the evidence collected, and the stage was ready. I whispered to myself, every move had been calculated for maximum impact. Daniel and Vanessa believed they had won, that I was gone forever, that false confidence would be the key to their undoing. I began by contacting my lawyer, carefully explaining the situation without revealing my location. Every word was precise, every detail intentional. The lawyer was shocked, but understood the gravity immediately. Documents, photographs, recordings, all would be used to challenge the estate transfer and expose the conspiracy. Legal action would be swift, undeniable, and devastating. Next, I returned to my former home under the cover of night. Jake and Tyler provided surveillance, ensuring no unexpected encounters. I moved like a shadow, careful not to leave fingerprints, but leaving subtle evidence for later. The office had already provided a treasure trove of proof, but I needed to secure additional documents and hidden recordings. As I worked, I recalled the birthday photograph, the altered medical records, and the manipulated prescriptions. Each piece of deception became a weapon. Every small betrayal was now ammunition for my case. The careful orchestration of my supposed incompetence would now become the evidence that brought their entire plot to light. By morning, I had everything in place: photographs of secret files, recordings of conversations, financial documents, proving unauthorized access. All were ready. Jake and Tyler assisted in organizing the evidence, ensuring it could be presented convincingly. It was meticulous, deliberate, and foolproof. The next step was public exposure. I arranged for discreet leaks to trusted media sources and key financial authorities. Daniel and Vanessa were still unaware that I was alive. Their performances, their carefully crafted public image of grief, would now be dismantled piece by piece. The betrayal, greed, and planning that had gone unnoticed for months would now be undeniable to everyone. I watched as the initial waves of scrutiny reached them. Financial institutions began inquiries, friends and colleagues questioned inconsistencies, and the media circulated investigative reports. Daniel and Vanessa panicked, trying to control the narrative, but every lie they had told was now public knowledge. The meticulous documentation I had collected left no room for their denials. Finally, the confrontation became official. Legal representatives confronted them with evidence of their conspiracy, revealing every detail of their plans, every document, every recording. They were speechless, the confidence they had relied on completely shattered. For The first time, they understood the consequences of underestimating me. As I observed from a safe distance, I felt a wave of satisfaction. Justice, careful, patient, and complete, had been served. Daniel and Vanessa's betrayal had cost them everything. And I, having survived the ocean, the deceit, and the danger, had reclaimed control over my life, my fortune, and my family legacy. The battle was over, but the lessons would remain forever. The chaos had settled, and for the first time in weeks I could breathe. I whispered to myself, Daniel and Vanessa had been exposed, their schemes laid bare for the world to see. Justice had arrived, not through rash action, but careful planning and patience. Authorities reviewed the evidence I had collected, confirming the depth of their betrayal. Financial institutions froze accounts temporarily, and legal proceedings began in earnest. Friends, colleagues, and neighbors who had unknowingly been part of the facade now understood the truth. Every lie had been dismantled, every deceit documented. I reflected on the danger I had faced, the betrayal by those I had trusted most. It was a cruel realization that family could act with such cold calculation. And yet, surviving that betrayal had strengthened me in ways I never expected. The ocean, the yacht, and the hidden conspiracies had tested my resilience, and I had endured. Jake and Tyler remained my steadfast allies, quietly observing and assisting when needed. Without their support, some of the more complex investigations and evidence collection would have been impossible. Their loyalty and courage reminded me that true family is not always defined by blood, but by trust and integrity. As the legal system took its course, I slowly returned to normalcy. The old house, once a symbol of betrayal, was now reclaimed and secured. I ensured that all future access to my financial affairs was tightly controlled. With multiple safeguards in place, every lesson from the ordeal was documented, a roadmap to prevent future treachery. The emotional weight of the betrayal lingered, but it was tempered by the satisfaction of justice achieved. Daniel and Vanessa had learned that greed and deception carry consequences, and I had learned that courage, patience, and intelligence could turn even the darkest moments into opportunities for triumph. I also reflected on forgiveness, though not for them. Forgiveness in this context was understanding that I could move forward without being consumed by anger or fear. The ocean could not hold me, deception could not break me, and betrayal could not define me. I was the author of my own life and destiny. As the sun set over the harbor, I stood on the dock, breathing deeply and watching the waves. The past would always be a part of me, but the future was mine to shape. I had survived, uncovered the truth, reclaimed my fortune, and ensured that justice had been served. And in that moment, I felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that I had triumphed against unimaginable odds. My story, though filled with betrayal and danger, ended not in despair, but in victory. I had faced the ultimate test of family, fortune, and courage, and emerged stronger, wiser, and unstoppable. This was not just revenge, it was reclaiming my life, and it was complete.